This is a very exciting program. It's one of the first times we're doing something like this in terms of really diving deep into the Israeli political landscape. And as many of us have heard, I think the title of this series of programs we're doing is Israel Elections Again, question mark. What is this, the fourth or the fifth elections in as many months?
Fourth.
Yeah, not as many, but if we thought that there was conflict, if there was tension, if there was craziness in the U.S. political system, we haven't seen anything until we dive deep into what happens in the state of Israel. And I want to thank you very much for being here, Achia. I look forward to learning from you as well as some of our other speakers of the context of our series together. But before we turn it over to you, I just want to say that and Cantor Lieberman and I, we were talking about this text the other day. We talked about the relationship between Shammai and Hillel, the two Talmudic Mishnaic scholars. And at the end of the day, there was one person who was agreed with more than the other. Does anybody know which one, who we agreed with, Shammai or Hillel, more than the other? You have a 50-50 shot, 50-50 shot.
Hillel.
Try the other one.
Like I said, Shammai.
Yeah, so what made Shammai so agreeable, according to the Talmud, was that more often than not, right? Shammai really went out of his way to understand Hillel's opinion. He went out of his way to hear the other side of the argument, and that's what made Shammai so wise. That's what made him. I don't want to say correct is not the right word, but so appropriate, was because he actually was able to look at multiple issues from different perspectives. And he did so in a respectful way. And doing so helped him shape and clarify his own view, as well as be more compassionate in terms of the arguments, the understandings, the debates that he had. And Achia, I'm so excited that you're here. But I just want to make it very clear, by you being here isn't any sort of endorsement of any particular political stance or view or point. Right, we're going to have multiple speakers pointing from very different perspectives from all over the political spectrum that is Israel, just to give us an insight, to give us that same Shammai perspective, so we could shape our own opinions. And a lot of what we're going to hear is going to be some things that we agree with. Some things that we're going to be hearing are going to be things that we don't. And what's important is that we approach this like Shammai, as a time, an opportunity to learn about where the entire spectrum of political beliefs and understandings are, to better enrich our own opinions. So once again, I want to thank everybody for being here. Achia, I want to thank you. You're one of the most humble and modest people when I look at your biography that you gave us to share, and in terms of what in terms of your accomplishments as a spokesperson for an incredibly important organization in Israel, your background in terms of how you really have embraced and diving deep into these politics and these arguments for quite some time. Just a reminder that this session is being recorded. So for anybody who is comfortable or is not comfortable, you can turn off your video. But I just want to let you know. And without further ado, Achia, I'm going to turn it over to you. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Josh. And thank you, Hanan, for having me over. And I'm happy to see Amishai here as well. This is like closing a little circle for us. I met Hanan and Amishai back in Israel in 2014, right?
2004.
Sorry, yeah, a decade before, yeah, 2004. When Hanan and Ami came to Israel for a year course, for a gap year in Israel, and I was on my own Shnat Sharut, we call it in Israel, year of service, extra year of service before the army. I wanted to be in a place that is connecting between the Jewish diaspora and Israel. I thought that the Jewish diaspora is one of the foundations of Judaism and Israel, obviously. And I thought to myself that having a whole year with Americans would be an interesting experience, and indeed it was. After that, and during that year, Hanan and also Ami a few times, I think, came to my house. It was really nice. I grew up in a small village outside of Jerusalem called Nataf. I was really like a nature boy, like being raised in between trees. Um, and yeah, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself before I'm getting into my politics and in general politics. So I'll take maybe a few moments just to describe where I came from. So I grew up in Nataf, as I said, and it's outside of Jerusalem. But my mom came from Jerusalem. My dad came from a small kibbutz called Chafetz Chaim. It's actually a religious kibbutz, Poalei Agudat Israel, which means like, think about it as socialist, religious, even ultra-Orthodox Jews. My dad came from a family of 10 brothers and sisters. Three of his brothers died during the years, one in a car accident, one in from hepatitis, and one in a 1973 war in the Golan Heights. It was just a show in Israel called Shat Ne'ilah, a TV show, which actually tells a lot about the story that my uncle died in. And my name, Achia, as you can probably hear from its sound, means Achia, or my brothers to God. And I grew up in a house that is very Zionist, very religious house. I would say, Valley of Tears in English. Okay, I didn't know it even has an English version. So I grew up in a like religious Zionist house. Do I need to mute people? Okay, sorry. And the place that I grew up was like heavily influenced by the Holocaust. Both my parents have German background. Lots of my family was killed in the Holocaust, and the sentence "never again" was always echoing in my family. My house in Nataf, my parents' house, the whole, like, all the walls are covered with books from the Holocaust, and this is the notion that I grew up in, and I think that many Israelis and also Jews around the world. And the army for me was something I was really looking forward to it. I did the best I can in all the tryouts, and I got accepted to a unit called Duvdevan. It's an elite unit specialized in counterterrorism in the West Bank. I spent 2 years in that unit, and during my time there, I felt there's a big gap between what I thought we were doing on the day-to-day basis as an army and what I was actually doing on my day-to-day missions. I found that this gap is something that I felt was hidden from me, and I felt is a bad representation of what is the reality in Israel and what is the politics in this region and what should be. So when I finished my army, I continued my journeys with the Jewish diaspora. Straight after I finished, I went to South Africa to be a counselor in a summer camp there, and then later for a year I was a shaliach in Los Angeles for a youth movement called Abonim Dror, that maybe some of you know. And during that time, I think I developed my own politics and point of view, coming out from a vision that I believe that what's going on in the occupied territories is wrong. I think that there's better solution to the reality that we're in right now. And I felt like the gap between what people think there is going and what is actually is going is something that is hurting us as a nation and obviously our neighbor in a pursuit of peace and better future. And that's something that is, I think, going through with me in life since then. When I went back to Israel, I went to the university. I spent 3 years in the university. I did my degree in politics and government, but also I was also in the student union. I managed the spokesperson and advocacy, I would call advocacy maybe, office with a student. And right after, I joined an organization called Breaking the Silence. What was then in 2014 a quite small organization, not so known, of soldiers who, what we did as an organization, what we do, what they do, I'm not there anymore, collect testimonies from soldiers on the daily basic actions and reality in the occupied territories, which means Gaza, West Bank, and East Jerusalem, but mainly West Bank. And I joined the organization because I thought that this is my shlichut. I thought that this is something that I must do as a person. I must do as someone who believes that we can do better as a nation, as I always believed. And the next 5 years I spent as a spokesperson part of the time, and also the manager of the communication department, the director of the communication department of the organization. With the years, the organization has been under heavy attacks by the Israeli government and by civil society, and I'm not going to get into that today. But it's after 5 years, I felt it was quite enough for me, and I also felt that the Israeli political sphere has changed. I think that it's harder to speak. There's less ability to communicate between different parties and different opinions. I felt the civil sphere has been completely polluted with fake news or anti-truth, I would say, trends. And today what I do, what I did, I left, and then I started advising all kind of different organizations, and was advising few central, I would say, bodies in the last protests in Israel that was going on for the past year. And now I joined to run a project that I'm very excited for, and I think I find my place in, and it's called the Fake Reporter. What we do, we have a platform to report all kind of fake accounts, avatar, like fake news, fake campaigns, all kind of things like that. What we have is like a group of researchers. We research everything that is being reported to us, and then we try and publish our findings through the Israeli media. It's a very professional organization, and based on research, and I manage it and do lots of the communication around it. It's heavily connected to the elections that we're in right now. I'll talk a little bit about it. But I really enjoy being a little bit on the outside of the Israeli politics for a little bit. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me. Hanan, I hope I didn't forget anything. But if I thought about like starting, I'm the first speaker about the election, right? Yeah. So maybe we'll start with a little bit of background of what, like, how we got to the situation. I wanna share with you like presentation that I've did. Like, it's not too exciting, but it will help me explain. Wait, it's supposed to be. 1 second. Not this. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
We see it now. We see it as a presentation. Yeah.
All right. So when we talk about the Israeli election, Israel is in a state that it hasn't been, like, the state situation that hasn't been part of the Israeli politics ever. It's so unique and actually different than what happened in most democratic countries. We're in a situation that we are in our kind of 4 election in a row. starting from April 2019 until today. I think when we talk about the current election, we need to understand a little bit the background of what happened until now. So we're gonna go through it. If there's any question, just write to me or ask or something.
If there's any questions, you can write in the chat and we'll ask Achia.
Cool. So we talked about that. This is a little bit about how the elections are connected today. I feel like what we used to know about the clusters in the Israeli politics, or kind of like the parties, or the tendency between left and right and center or whatever, is almost irrelevant in the election today. I'm gonna say something later that's gonna contradict what I said now, but this is the notion in the Israeli public in many ways, and definitely inside politics itself. Another one, yes, we're in our fourth election. We had one in April 2019, one in September 2019, then March 2020. Then we managed to form a government, and now a year after, it again collapses. The first election was in April 2019. When we look at the results, we can see kind of like a division between what we used to call left and right, and the actual way that it's is built is a little bit more tricky than that. If we'll go all the way from the left, you can see the green, Hadash and Balad, and Hadash, Tal, Balad, and Ra'am, are the green are the Arabic Party, or the Arab Citizens of Israel parties. Here they have 10 seats. This will grow later in the last election to 15 seats. It's crazy growth of mandates, and this is something that is gonna completely change the election this year. We're gonna talk about that. After that, we have Labor and Meretz, who ran together, Avoda and Meretz. We call them the left or center left in Israel, but there's even more center left now, blue and white, Kachol Lavan. Gantz was the leader of it. They reached 35 seats. They ran under when Benny Gantz came to the politics, I'm sure that most of you know, he came as a candidate that promises going back to more calm. I always see him as like a Biden. Yeah, seems like that he represents a lot of the traditional and let's say consensus vote. He was the chief of staff. In Israel, we love generals. Generals loves to go to politics, and that's what happened with Kachol Lavan. Was formed later on by 4 different chief of staffs that came together and brought with them all kind of different people, which wasn't enough, because the Likud that election got also 35 seats, and together with Israel Beitenu and the Rightist Union, Kulanu, Shas, and United Torah Judaism, they formed a 65 government, 65 seats together, which everyone thought would be enough for them to be in the government. But then Israel Beitenu came out, and no one wanted to sit with anyone. I'm not going to get into all the politics around it, but both Gantz and Netanyahu failed to form a government, and we got to the second election. Second election, interesting, because for the first time, the biggest party is not actual Likud party. It's blue and white, Kachol Lavan. Gantz is again running, forms wins the biggest government, the biggest party. But as you know, in the Israeli election, it's not it's a parliamentary politics. It means that only a coalition can form a government, and the coalition is built by different parties. And in the end of it, the government, the division wasn't enough to the center-left camp, or mainly because a different reason, but the main reason is like the camps most of this camp didn't want to sit with the Arab parties, didn't want to be supported by the Arab parties. You can see here, the Arab parties are now the joint list, all of them together. The Arab parties came together and managed to get to 13 mandates. They become very, very strong candidates in Israel. And that changes everything, because now if the center left or left want to form a government, they must lean on the vote of the Israeli Arabs. And if and in Israel, we've been, after a few years that has, like the Arabs are under heavy criticism, or some would say attacks or slander by the government and by the Israeli right, which leads sitting with the Israeli Arabs as almost as a sin. So it didn't actually work out. But Israel Beitenu, a right-wing party, some would say more right-wing than the Likud, led by Avigdor Lieberman, is refusing to be part of the right camp, which leaves us in the end in a place that is, again, no one can form a government. What's interesting about this division, that when we look at it, we can say left and right, but when the left doesn't want to sit with 20% of the Israeli citizens that are Arabs, and when the right doesn't want to sit with, and when the right is built of a camp that most of them are ultra-Orthodox, the biggest parties are ultra-Orthodox, and many of them declare as not Zionist, and the other part of the right wing is Israel Beitenu, which is a right-wing party, but doesn't want to sit with Benjamin Netanyahu. We understand that the way that we divide Israeli politics is quite out of date. The more we got forward with the election, the more we understand that the thing is the thing why we vote in Israel is actually if Bibi is going to be the prime minister or not. And the camps that support Bibi, or willing to sit with Bibi, or not willing to sit with Bibi, becomes way more significant than the idols that they stand around them. Yeah, the values that they believe in. Third election, and we have results that are actually enough to form a government. The Israeli right. Actually, it's hard to say what I said. It's not exactly because of the result. We kind of stuck in the same situation as the last election. Yeah, the right can't really form a camp. The left really can't form a camp. Israel Beitenu is in the middle, doesn't want to sit with the Arabs, doesn't want to sit with Benjamin Netanyahu. We're stuck. But we're forming a government. And the reason that we form a government is that the second biggest party, Kahol Lavan, led by Benny Gantz for the third election, 3 times 33, not more than 33%. I can't remember how many percent of the population it is, but like the second biggest party in Israel is being voted for its leader promise not to sit with Benjamin Netanyahu in the government. That's his main thing. He has kind of like 0 other values that he stands by. Yeah, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but really not a solid group of values, or not a solid group of it's not values, it's an agenda. It's a political agenda. That's more correct to say. Except not sitting with Benjamin Netanyahu. And what happened right here in the election of 2020, March 2020, is that the coronavirus has got to us, and we understood that this is going to be a big problem here, and Benny Gantz take a very hard decision that is being criticized all the way to be 4 to 5 mandates today in the polls today, and he forms a government with Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, I don't know how it looks from the outside, but from the inside, you need to understand that people in Israel have voted and advocated and supported and Benny Gantz for a long time, 3 full election. They chose the guy again and again and again by the promise that he's going to beat Netanyahu. For the people of Israel who voted Benny Gantz, to see him go and form a government with Benjamin Netanyahu, it really shattered everything that they believed in politics, I would say. Everything that they believed about the way that he can fix the wrong thing that they see that are wrong in politics, and kind of like created a new situation that the people were against Benny Gantz now support him. The people who are supporting Benny Gantz are now against him. And in a way, Benjamin Netanyahu managed to shatter the Israeli center-left camp again. Now, another thing that you can see here that are very, very interesting is 15 mandates to the joint list. 15 mandates to the joint list puts the joint list as the 3rd biggest party in Israel. It hasn't happened ever in the history of Israel that so many Israeli citizens, Arab Israeli citizens, went and voted. We see a huge rage in interest in politics. They understand more. They understand what they can get from politics. And the fact that the Israeli-Palestinian peace talks or dream of peace is being shattered made them understand that they need to act within Israel in order to change the situation for them and for the Palestinians outside of Israel. And that made them the 3rd strongest player in the field. Now, what happened also in the last few elections, it came to the point that Shas and Yahadut HaTorah, the 2 ultra-Orthodox government parties, has really swore allegiance, if that's how you say it, to Benjamin Netanyahu. In the past, it was a sectarian parties. They really went with left or right. Maybe they have a tendency to conservatism or more traditional values, but the most important thing for them was to have the ability to gain political parties for their people. Now it's a little bit more of like a connection of like what they call Gusha Yamin, is not really built just because of right-wing values and more of Shas, Yahadut HaTorah, and Likud, and that's a whole different ideology than what is the traditional Zionist right wing in Israel, and that's a whole conversation for itself. Now, this is the coalition today. We can look a little bit into it here. The coalition means that this is who is forming the government in Israel. The parliament sits and decides as the executive branch, kind of. Likud and Peretz are 50%. Peretz is actually was the head of the Avodah, and now he's lonely in the government. Yeah, this is how crazy Israel politics right now. Mefleget Ha'avodah, Derech Eretz is another interesting. It's only. Derech Eretz is another party that is like a branch outside of Kahol Lavan. I'm not going to get into it now. Gesher, 1 person. Yahadut HaTorah and Shas, which is 16 mandates together. That's a very strong force together. 16 would put them as like the 3rd biggest over the joint list. That's a coalition today. Yeah. So it's less about today. We're less about. Oh, I'm sorry. I closed the. 1 second. say in the Israeli election today, it's less about left and right values. It's more about Bibi or not Bibi. It really, really reflects a few things that are like heavily in the core of what and why people are going to vote this year, or these election, which are. And wait, I just want to open it. And I think that the thing that will affect the elections are Corona. Of course, the Corona, the way that we dealt with the Corona in Israel. Definitely, people saw the Benjamin Netanyahu, and that's include the right as a poorly managing, poorly dealing with the disease in Israel. But on the other hand, in the past just like few months, the fact that he managed to bring vaccinations to Israel so fast brought him back a lot of his voters and a lot of his respect within the Israeli right. But still, he seems to be he's perceived as a poor, I would say, a leader in this time when it goes to with the disease in Israel, and I think that this really affects the election. The second thing is the Abraham agreements, the peace or kind of peace deals with different countries in the Middle East. This is something that is a great success for Netanyahu. People see it as a achievement that he hasn't achieved for all of his terms until now. This is like this one thing that's gonna be his legacy, and a lot of people are strongly are supportive of him now because of that. And the interesting about the Abraham Accord, it brought Netanyahu the ability to create new political campaign within the Israeli Arabs in Israel. We'll get to that in a second. Again, like the last elections, maybe the number one thing that runs people or runs the division between the government, between the parties, is the Bibi's trial of and the alleged corruptions cases that Bibi is involved with. What's really interesting about those things is that we've seen like two different clusters. One that really see those cases as something that is going to be that is beyond politics, something that it doesn't matter that if they support the right values, they're going to vote against Bibi. And on the other hand, you see a cluster of Netanyahu and the Hared and the ultra-Orthodox that say that there's no corruption, or that there's a conspiracy against Netanyahu, led by the deep state, includes the Supreme Court or the general legislative branch in Israel. It's a very, I would say, dangerous campaign that Netanyahu is running. But we need to understand that Netanyahu is running a campaign for his life, not for his politics. If he's out of his chair, he is in a place that he has way less ability to run the case against him. And I think that he doesn't have lots of other strategies. Trump in the United States, I think, is something that comes to the really changes the votes, or like puts the election in Israel in another light. What happened in the Capitol and the fact that from being like this what is seen in many by the Israeli government and especially by Netanyahu as like this huge success of bringing as being a friend of Trump, now seems to be a little bit of I would say awkward situation.
I just want to say that coming in and out of Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, the main road, Kvish Echad, there used to be this huge poster of Bibi and Trump like hugging, and it said in another league. That's what it said, and that hasn't been up now for a couple of months.
Yeah, yeah. Netanyahu is like, and interesting to about this poster. Just a few weeks, the opponents of Netanyahu, someone who's from the opposition, brought up this poster again and said like Liga Acheret. Now it became like something to use against Netanyahu. So that's something that you guys probably understand. The ultra-Orthodox, in the past few months has now become kind of like as perceived in many as enemy of the state. Many Israelis are very frustrated with the ultra-Orthodox and their cooperation with the fight against the coronavirus. They refused, again, most of them, and say most of their leaders refused to cooperate with the Israeli authorities and set a really bad example for their people, which caused a peak within the ultra-Orthodox in Israel, a peak in the people who were sick and also died from it. And of course, you cannot really exclude yourself, or there's no barriers for the disease, and therefore the Israeli public saw it as a selfish and kind of extra territory that completely got out of hand. And since Netanyahu, it's his number one political partners, the Haredis, so he really couldn't or wouldn't do much about it. And there's been like very low enforcement within the ultra-Orthodox communities. They talk about 60% and 80% more law enforcement within the general Israeli public compared to the law enforcement in the ultra-Orthodox communities. And that's, again, something that's going to play a strong card in the elections, because people are now, we have a growing number of people that are completely, I would say it explicitly, developed a hate for the ultra-Orthodox community. It's very sad, that situation in Israel. And they vote more for parties that are just simply using that trend in order to gain mandates. So the fact that the coronavirus and the ultra-Orthodox parties are both in the game in a way has changed a little bit the way that the strategy in the anti-Bibi camp. Protests. There's been a year of protests in Israel. Those protests, in the end of it, did they change something? I think yes. What have they changed? I don't really know. I think that first and foremost, people don't see Netanyahu as a good leader in these times. This is something that you might say that the protests have put on the table. Again and again, they managed to point out what is wrong in the crisis that we're in. It doesn't matter if it's the economical or the political, or of course the health. Netanyahu is perceived by many as a poor leader, and that's, I think, thanks, if you see it or not, a lot to the protests. Last, maybe I want to say what's new in the election. I want to show you maybe this. Yeah. You can, if you look over here, we see different photos. We'll start from the left. On the left, you see a campaign. Shvu ad sheyitzeh ashan lavan. Sit until we see a white smoke, like people like the way the Pope is being elected. Titachtu kshakolot lo yavdu. Come together so we won't lose any votes. What's happening in the center left camp was quite ridiculous. Each and every politician that wanted to be on the map started his own party. We saw, I think, around 10 different parties with 10 different people. Slowly, they fell out of the race, but the Israeli left the center left was so shattered, so anyone could try to take a lead there. On the extreme right, you see a rise of support and an endorsement by Netanyahu. The person you see here, Itamar Ben-Gvir, a Kahana supporter. He used to say that he sees himself as the continuer of Kahana. He used to hold in his house a picture of Baruch Goldstein, the Jewish terrorist that killed 29 Palestinians in a terrorist attack in the Tomb of the Patriarchs in Hebron. Netanyahu is endorsing him. And was endorsing, tried to and managed to do a coalition between him and Smotrich. They call it the Zionist, the religious Zionists. What's interesting, and not many people remember that also in the first election, in all those rounds, Netanyahu was endorsing Itamar Ben-Gvir. Back then, it didn't work for him because Smotrich didn't join Ben-Gvir. This time, they joined together, and that might be the deal breaker for Netanyahu. Therefore, you see, as the picture here, there's a very strong chance that the Israeli government is going to be built with Kahanist supporters. I don't know if you all know, but Kahana is defined in the United States and around the world as a terrorist organization. So that's what we're going to have in the Israeli election on that side. Last two things, Tikva Hadasha, Gideon Sa'ar, a very strong right-wing Likud member that separated from the Likud and now leads the second biggest, or the third, depends on the polls, party. Gideon Sa'ar was a very strong Likud supporters for years. He has a very strong base. He has many supporters from the center and the center left because of the Just Not Bibi or the anti-Bibi camp. It just show you again how little this thing is, how it works. And just above him, you see over here next to Bibi, it's Mansour Abbas. Mansour Abbas is the head of the Islamic movement. He used to be part of the joint list. Now he's separated from the joint list and is being endorsed in many ways in its own weird campaign by Netanyahu. And Netanyahu really wants him to be elected. He's actually, when it goes to values, he's quite closer to Netanyahu and the Israeli and the ultra-Orthodox. He's religious. He believes in traditional values. He's against gay marriage and so on and so on. And therefore, Netanyahu is pretty good for him. But he's mainly a smart and opportunistic politician. So that's a little bit what's going on right now. This is another thing. Maybe I'll talk to you about it later. What's interesting around this thing is that even though the way that the mandates is divided today, it's less about right or left when we as we know it traditionally, right and left in Israel. It still plays a very strong card. We need to understand the last three elections. The reason we didn't build a government was because of these values, not because Bibi anti-Bibi, but because the right wing Israel Beitenu didn't want to sit with a joint list, which were Arab the Arab votes, and because Yamina didn't want to be part of a coalition that is not supporting annexation. So in generally, the right and lefts in the end of it, even now, still is the main reason that actually we are able to form or not form a government, and more than that, the Israeli politics has lost its values. It's the center left camp that lost its values and completely shattered to like pieces. So that's maybe a little bit about it. Maybe we'll stop for a few questions, and maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later. Yeah.
If anyone, does anyone have a question they want to ask? Because I have some questions. Beth.
No. Go ahead.
So I do want to get to, if you were to have us all vote for a party in this election, if all of us were to vote for a party in this election, who should we vote for and why? And that would be my first question.
That's a very strong and very, very good question. And it obviously depends on many things. I think that people strategize their vote in different ways. Some people vote by their values, some by gut feelings, some because of what their parents vote, and some by, because what they felt on the same day they went to the voting booth. You can really encounter anything. As many of you probably know, it's even more critical than the United States votes, the campaigns in the last day. People vote I can't remember the percent, but there's a high percentage of people voting in the last minute. I'll tell you the way I see it. I put myself in the left-wing camp, mainly because the way I see the future of Israel is in the Middle East. I don't think we're gonna move anywhere. I believe that Israel is surrounded by other countries, has more than 20% population of Arabs within it as citizens, and more than 5 million, around 5 millions of non-citizens that are controlled or managed or heavily affected by the Israeli government's decisions and acts. So when I think about my kids, when I think about the future here, I think about a Jewish-Arab joint reality. I think about what is this partnership, and therefore I would vote with anyone. I would tell you to vote with anyone that supports Jewish-Arab partnership, and that would be from Avodah to the left, and I think that the two most important parties today are the Joint List, which brought a revolution to Israeli politics. I really like the leader of the Joint List, Ayman Odeh. He's a real peacemaker. He's a peace enthusiast. And I also really like the Meretz. I used to vote Meretz. It's less about, I don't like what's going on there lately. It's become very sectarian. But I think what's interesting now in the Israeli left is Merav Michaeli. Merav Michaeli is taking forward the Avodah back to its values, and emphasizes a lot gender. It's the only party led by a woman, and I think that's for itself something that must be recognized and supported. So those are my favorite.
Anyone want to ask a question?
Althea, how do you respond to people who say can never be peace with the Arabs? And so they vote with that in mind.
So first of all, I really feel for that. And like growing up in Israel is pretty frustrating when you think about the future and experience a very harsh day-to-day life. I think that the number one people who suffers from it are the Arabs, not the Israelis. We also suffer from it, but we are less of the underdog, and therefore we need to understand that they don't enjoy the situation as well. I think that once people are in a situation that they suffer, they try to change their reality and their kids' reality, and I think that in general, if you ask any Israeli, if you ask one-on-one Palestinians or Israeli Arabs, they would agree that to live in peace is way more important and for them than living on war. So the question is, why still people? Why would people believe such something that is almost irrational, as like there's no chance for a peace with Arabs? And I think that this is a result of ideology and campaigns more than actual like an analysis of the reality that we live in. And it's also pretty simple to look on our history. We managed to, like, Israel is a country that was built from nothing, right? People coming from the diaspora, sitting here, forming an army, starting a war, and actually managed to establish a state later, managed to sign a peace agreement with the strongest army in the region, the Egyptian army, and then peace with Jordan, and managed to really raise a successful economy, revive a language. Really, like, you can really see amazing things happening here. Now, you tell me that I'm signing a peace agreement with the poorest, most beaten, with less, like the smallest political rights and ability in the region, the Palestinian. That's something we cannot do. That's something we've reached our potential. That's like when the Jewish mind stopped working. I don't believe that. I believe it's an agenda. I believe it's an ideology, and I think that we need to change this ideology, and that's why I'm not in that camp in many ways. I believe it's more than that. I believe that like there's an ideology to kill the hope for peace, and I think this is very sad, but it's a smart move by people that don't want to give up any of their privileges.
Any other questions? Okay.
I have one.
Yeah. So,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you see a day when the Joint List or an Arab party is part of a ruling coalition? We came somewhat close, or so it seemed, from America in one of the rounds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it was very, very close. It was very, very close. The truth is, if in Kahol Lavan, in the end of it, there was two members that Kahol Lavan brought in order to look a little bit more center: Yoaz Hendel and Hauser. Those two members are ideologically in the right, very like fair to say that they were always straight with their values and what they believe in, and they're anti-Netanyahu because of his corruption, but they are deep right. I mean, like pro-settlements and annexation, which I see as straight out apartheid. And they called for it, and when they were voted by center left votes, they refused to sit with the Arabs in their list. Why? I think it's the base is racism, but they coded it with all kind of different things. But if we took them out, it's two people that actual were the student. There was two people in the end of it that stopped us from having a coalition that is somewhat based on the joint list. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't be part of the government, but I think this is the next step. I think we're in the Israeli Arab Revolution right now. This is the time we're in. Right now, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is running a campaign inside the Israeli Arab community. He goes city after city after city, tries to win the Arab vote. He is willing to sit and lean on the Arab vote because I believe that he's less of a racist and more of an opportunist, and he understands that in the fight of his life, he needs any vote, and also he wants to break down the joint list. But in the end of it, for Netanyahu to run a campaign for Arab voters, that needs a shift within the Israeli society in the way that they see the Arabs in general, not just Israeli Arabs. And I think that we're in that situation right now. And I think that in the coming years, we're gonna see those parties way stronger in their politics. We're gonna see the people way stronger in their understanding of politics, and the Arab sector demanding more. And I think it's a very positive and encouraging trend. And I think it will end up also in a government concise with Arab citizens of Israel that are part of the Israeli government. Inshallah, like they say.
Or inshallah, like Biden said.
Inshallah, inshallah.
Achia, do you think in any way the death of Sheldon Adelson, who's a big financial supporter of Bibi Netanyahu, will impact this next election?
I don't know where the money goes now. I think that I'm not sure that it goes anywhere else. I have a feeling that the funding is still in the same direction. You know that Sheldon Adelson is the primary donor of Netanyahu. He's a big donor also of Im Tirtzu. I want to show you now. Maybe it's something interesting that is happening now that I'm very involved with. There's a Stop the Steal campaign going right now in Israel by Im Tirtzu, which is also supported by Adelson family. Here it shows Uzi Fogelman, the judge Uzi Fogelman, who is the head of the election committee. They say he's Boger Keren Wexner. Keren Wexner is anyway, like a whole deep. I'm not gonna get into the details, but in general, like a deep state theory that they're gonna forge the election. Here you can see that the banner over here is stopping the forgeries. There's actually a whole campaign running now, Stop the Steal in Israel, run by Netanyahu, #1 civil society organization, supported by Sheldon Adelson. So I think like this thing's gonna continue. It's troubling. I think that there is a shift though, because the fact that Trump wasn't elected, and the fact that Adelson has passed away, and the fact that Netanyahu's trials are coming forward again and again and again and again, I think we're gonna see. I think those things in the coming future gonna change. The politics in Israel, but you know, Bibi is a smart politician. He has many rabbits in his hat.
Any other questions? Okay, Rabbi, would you like to close? You're muted. You're muted.
I've said if that only happens 3 times a day, it's been a good day. That I start to talk when I'm muted. But okay, I just want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your expertise and for providing an incredibly valuable perspective, as well as all the background information on what's going on in Israel. I mean, this is somewhat of it's an interesting time, although to be fair, it's a blessing and a curse, right? To live in interesting times. Is that a Fiddler on the Roof quote? I think, I don't know if I made that up, but no, it's
May- may-
not.
May I just say,
What?
like, maybe I just say something to on to close it up on my behalf?
Oh, please, 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 please.
No, I just want to say that I think that the Jewish diaspora has a very strong position in the way that Israel is being shaped. We see how Sheldon Adelson, one person, has heavily impacted Israeli politics, from the paper that he runs in Israel, Israel Hayom, which is the most distributed paper in Israel, to his funding. I think, of course, it's decreasing our democracy and really hurts the value of how a democracy should be built. But I do appreciate the fact that he believes that he's a big supporter of Israel, and I think that he puts his efforts there. And I don't think it must be money, but I believe that it must be putting your heart in a place that is so heavily affected by you, and many times you guys want it to be affected by you, and I think it's fine. You see it as your home, and then and we see you as our not just guest, but our I think we all understand like the connection. So I would say Israel is suffering right now from like a heavy erosion in its democracy, and I feel it's going to be worse. Um, Try to find a way that you can be involved, and I think that being involved and coming from a place that is right now understand more and more the deep importance of truth speaking, and of the fact that like what is happening online and what is happening under our nose turns out to be very extreme and dangerous situation to the foundation of democracy. I would call you to find a way to be part of it, and if you need any information about it, I can really try and help each and every one of you that is interested in that, to find the way that their passion and their thing that they think is most important can be implemented here. Yeah, sorry for that. Just
No, please, please. I'm sorry, and I just want to thank you again. Achia, we have your contact information, I believe. So if anybody here does want to reach out with any more specific questions, thoughts, responses, reactions to what we heard today, Achia has graciously offered to help all of us in that regard. And I think the point you said is engagement. And I think that that's a beautiful piece in terms of think of how we can be engaged. And I think one of the best ways to get engaged, or at least the first steps towards meaningful engagement, is to inform ourselves, right? And that's what we're doing in terms of coming here, is we're learning, we're getting access to great, really wonderful minds and analyses of the issues from different perspectives. And the more we know, the more we'll be able to engage ourselves in really meaningful and in really helpful ways. So Achia, once again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for getting up. Not getting up. What time is it? It's evening, actually. It's morning for us. It's evening for you. I go backwards.
just
sometimes. I lose
missed the
track.
dinner. I just missed the dinner.
I lose
Fine.
track. I lose track of time. But thank you so much, Achia. Thank you, Cantor Lieberman. Thank you, everybody. Wishing you all a wonderful evening and a Chag Purim, happy Purim coming up. Be happy it's Adar. So we'll see all of you soon. And once again, thank you so much. Thank you, Beth, as well. Really, you've given us so much food for thought and things to think about. So
Mhm.
toda rabah.
Thank you. Okay. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.